Karen Tatman, thank you again for joining us today on this session of What's Up AEC.
My
We're
pleasure.
looking forward, absolutely, we look forward for our conversation. You are the past president of the ACEC chapter, Oregon, and you are the principal engineer with Consor. You used to be Quincy Engineering, I believe, Consor. You are a principal engineer. You have 35 years of diverse project experience ranging from small, rural to major interstates and highways. You're still actively involved in ACEC Oregon chapter. You obviously served as a president, the board of directors between 2016 and 2017. And you are the second woman in the organization's 60-year history to have served in this role. Congratulations, pretty exciting.
Thank you.
You're highly respected for your leadership acumen and definitely your as a transportation engineer and your expertise there. You have extensive experience, public sector, private sector, both. And you also have some work or actually involved in some legislative efforts for the ACEC in general as an organization. You know, to kick this session off, I'd like to know a little bit more about you. What got you into engineering in the first place, and how happy are you with it now that you spent more than 35 years practicing it?
Yeah. In hindsight, it was a fantastic decision. But I will say I did not go to college and aspire to be the co-chair of a legislative committee. That never even occurred to me, and I doubt it occurs to many folks who are thinking they might want to study engineering. I started out just being really good in math, and I truly didn't want to be an engineer initially. I'm the youngest of 5, so you can imagine my older siblings had all kinds of things to about what I should be doing. But my father was an engineer, and I really wanted to be a math teacher. I went through high school wanting to be a math teacher because I just loved math. And my father gave me some very sage advice. He said, it's fantastic to be a math teacher, but you should consider engineering because it will be a better trajectory for you. And by golly, he was right. And so I just come from a long line of engineers. I was just surrounded by engineers from different disciplines, but 2 major influences were civil engineers, and everyone told me if I go into civil engineering and do a very good job, I can work for a city, a county, a state, a private consultant. I can be in business for myself. I can go wherever I want in this world and work for whomever I want in this world, including myself. And the other sage advice my father gave me was if I went into civil engineering, he said, when the economy is good, engineers design things to be built. When the economy is poor, the government typically dumps money into having things be built to create work. So you'll always have a job if you are good at what you do. And I look back and just think that was, I probably did not get better advice than that. And I'm truly serving the public. I think my entire career has been public facing. As a DOT employee and project manager, and now as a consultant who does public agency work. It's just so rewarding to see what you've designed and brought together to be built, and working with a lot of smaller agencies who I sometimes look at projects and say they wouldn't have a project if it wasn't for project managers similar to me, because they don't know how to get through the system and make things happen. I think the only downside is my children who are now adult and grown just say, oh, come on, Mom, we know you got that bridge. We know you did that project. Enough already.
You're just too proud of your work. Keep talking about it.
I am, it gave my son an opportunity. My 33-year-old son who drives an older 1970s Volkswagen van, went down the California coast, stopped at a bridge, took a picture of the bridge that I managed through design and construction of him, his bus, his dog, and turned it into a jigsaw puzzle for Christmas. And talk about rewarding, like coming full circle in your career is just fantastic to have that opportunity. I guess to continue my story, I went to UC Davis, which is where several of my family members attended, and I worked for Caltrans, which is the California DOT, because I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I knew that was a great place to be from in terms of trying to afford a house and a career. So I went to work for Caltrans and I was there almost 15 years and then got a great opportunity to move over to Quincy Engineering. And I did that and started serving cities and counties and such as a project manager and a designer. And then when Consor purchased Quincy Engineering a couple of years ago, what I realized was that what Consor was doing as a national firm, they just didn't have a West Coast presence, and we had a strong West Coast presence. And so we had merged with another firm in the Pacific Northwest, and we went up and down the West Coast, and Consor purchased us. But what we are is just the West Coast arm for a company that does exactly what we do: infrastructure, transportation, water, wastewater. So we just joined a larger team, but we're doing exactly what we were doing and exactly what I've been doing my entire career.
Yeah, what year was that? 2021 when the merge happened, or when?
So Quincy Engineering merged with Murray Smith, who is Portland, Oregon based, in 2019. And then Consor purchased us both at the end of 2021. So we rebranded as Consor. It's been just really a year since the email addresses changed and that kind of thing. But it's given me an opportunity to take on a larger role with a larger firm. So for me, it opened a door that's been very satisfying.
Did it add more to your experience and expertise working on bigger projects, probably, and managing more people?
It mostly managing more people. I wouldn't say it added to my project portfolio in a significant way quite yet. We will be able to go after larger projects since we're, close to 1,500 instead of Quincy was 80, and Quincy and Murray Smith together, we were around 250. So definitely that. But I like to think I brought a portfolio that they didn't have on the West Coast. So yeah, it's been good. And then I've gone from managing our small, small is relative, our Salem office, which I had built from 0 to 12, to now I supervise 60, our entire roadway design staff in Oregon and Boise, which 60 roadway designers is a pretty formidable team in this geography.
And is it primarily civil engineers, or you do all the kind of practices in engineering?
So Consor wide, for my team, it's civil, but for Consor wide, we do a little bit of electrical, and we do some planning, we do some bridge assessment and that kind of thing. My team is roadway designers for transportation, publicly funded transportation projects.
Wow, is it busy times for you right now with the infrastructure bill and the projects that came out of that bill?
Yeah, mostly I would say that Oregon's DOT, so ODOT, we call them, are really leveraging their IIJA funds to handle the cost overruns that in construction projects that are actively under construction that have needed additional funding just because of inflation. So I wouldn't say for us that IIJA has created more project opportunities, because it really hasn't, and I'm hopeful that it does, but I just have not seen that in Oregon.
Do you think we have enough projects going on? Does the infrastructure, in other words, does the infrastructure bill solve a lot of the issues and problems that we face today in the public sector in particular, or you think we should have had more? What's your take on it?
Well, I think we could always use more, because, sometimes we build new things without really protecting the infrastructure system that we have. And a prime example of that in Oregon is we have this Interstate 5 bridge that goes over the Columbia River and connects Oregon with Washington. So Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, Washington, that is vital to NAFTA and international commerce. And it's a 100-year-old bridge. And it's incredible the amount of money that it needs to replace it. It needs to be replaced, and it will be. But because, we've been sort of kicking the can down the road for at least a decade and maybe 2 decades up here, what was probably, maybe $100 million project is now $6 billion. I mean, it just, the cost, when you delay large projects like that, the investment just becomes greater and greater. And it's almost unfathomable to find, to identify that level of funding for a project that is so necessary, and thinking about what would happen if that bridge failed at
And
any
who's
time.
responsible? Who's responsible for that bridge? Is it Oregon DOT or is it?
Oregon and Washington, I think, split the cost. They just call it the Interstate Bridge, and I'm sure they share in some responsibilities. It's a lift span, and it's funny because we call it the only stop sign on the interstate between Canada and Mexico. And there
Wow.
truly is a stop sign for when a large ship comes through, and they stop traffic on the interstate for 15, 20 minutes. While the
Wow.
lift span goes up, the ship goes under, and the lift span comes down. And when I asked some folks in the know, like, what's the worst case scenario here? And I'm thinking, the bridge is lifted and they can't release it to come back down. And it isn't that, it's like a piece of the actual lifting structure falling down.
Wow.
And damaging the bridge, and heaven forbid it falls on a motorist. But just like I grew up in California, and the state had to sink a lot of money into bridge seismic retrofits to make sure that bridges didn't fall down during
So
the
it's the
major
state's
earthquake. Same
responsibility.
thing.
So financially speaking, it's the state's responsibility to find the funds to kind
Yes.
of. And what if one state was able to succeed and the other state couldn't, if it's a joint bridge like this one?
Well, funny you should ask, because that's exactly what happened about 5 years ago. Oregon was all in, and we needed to find about $400 million. And we asked the state of Washington to find an equivalent, $400 million, just to go in and do the studies. And Washington just said, not interested. We've got other priorities. And if you can imagine, the state of Oregon, Portland is our hub. So this bridge connects Portland to Vancouver, Washington. Well, for Washington, their hub is Seattle. It is not Vancouver, Washington. So again, much higher priorities up there. And they said no. And so our legislators in Oregon said, well, if Washington can't find 400 million, let's find 400 million for them. And you're really talking about, your poor cousin, trying to find another $400 million under the couch cushion. And the voters of Oregon just kind of came out and said, nope, Washington needs to pay their fair share. And so we just walked away, and we did not talk about this project down at the Capitol. It became the project that shall not be named, because you can imagine all the money that got sunk into studies that just went poof, we're just poof, we're done. We're not talking about it anymore. And it just got picked up about a year ago. With some additional federal funds, mega project grants have now shown themselves to be an opportunity to provide some funds, and that's really reinvigorated it. So, and Washington stepped up and said, "Hey, Oregon, we're sorry, but we're here," and they voted their funds before we voted our funds. So I think we're onto something, but we still need to go find a few $1 billion under the federal couch cushion.
That was my next question. If the states failed to secure whatever funding they needed, does it elevate to the point where it becomes a federal responsibility at one point in time, or how far does it go up?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it should be a federal priority in terms of interstate commerce. And again, kind of pointing back to NAFTA, NAFTA has been around for a few decades now, and creating commerce through the U.S., connecting us to Mexico and Canada. And if that bridge were to fail, the impact on our economy, really up and down the West Coast, would be just devastating. So I think it should be.
That's what I'm thinking. It's an international route that connects countries, right? We're talking about Canada and Mexico and the United States. It's a huge vein, if I may say, for making sure that this route remains open and safe all the time is critical for the health of 3 economies, not just one. Right. So how come it's just left to the states to decide if that's a priority for them or not?
Well, I think, the various departments of transportation have to recognize and establish their own priorities, and then take action. And
so the Department of Transportation would not step in and say, no, you need to shuffle those priorities, the state of Washington?
You'd think so at some point.
What do they do then? If they don't take care of, a critical artery that feeds
Yes.
three economies, major economies in North America. What do they do then?
Exactly. I agree. I think there is, this country runs on the back of interstate and international commerce, and these bridges don't, like this, don't just carry trucks and cars. They connect ports and railroad, and there's a lot of infrastructure, interstate commerce infrastructure that relies on a large truck carrying goods being able to cross bridges like this and folks being able to get to work. So I think it should be a national, that our federal highways and our DOT should be very interested in this. But I've never seen them step in and tell a state what to do, because I think ultimately, we're still kind of founded on states' rights and states' priorities and those kinds of things. So that's what it is. I'm doing my best to help push it, but
you're just short of a couple of billions. That's all. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. I say, next time you look under the couch cushion, you just find a couple billion.
Karen, have you worked on private sector projects as well, or no, has it been public all through?
I really haven't. I've worked on public sector projects that have been related to private sector projects. So you can imagine large developments and things, especially in California, where developers are tasked with paying for a new interchange or an interchange expansion and that kind of thing. So certainly, everything's interconnected. But my career has been just basically publicly funded. So city, state, county, federally funded projects.
And do you feel the urge, or do you feel like you missed a part in your career that you haven't really practiced or experienced, which is working for the private sector? Do you think it's more interesting working for private sector, being a civil engineer?
It's hard for me to say since I haven't really done that. I will say my time at Quincy, we worked for two developers. We had two little development projects down when I was down in Sacramento in California, and both developers went belly up. So, I feel like we invested some time and energy without the reward that might have otherwise come with it. And lesson learned.
Absolutely. During your presidency period at ACEC chapter for Oregon, what were the major issues or challenges that you guys, or you in particular, kind of eyed down and wanted to nail?
Well, during my presidency, and we go from July 1st to June 30th, and Oregon is interesting in that our legislature is only in session for a portion of the year, and we have what we call the long session, where you can introduce just about any bill, and then we have short sessions where you can only, legislators are really limited in the number of bills they can pass. Well, I happen to be president during the long session, and trying to pass a large transportation funding package. So, it just sort of all came together. A little bit of pressure I felt to help ACEC and help our industry. But the good news is, it's what I do, it's the projects I do, and that's what I do for a living. So I was, I was in a good position to go down to our capital and meet with folks and talk about the need for transportation. And I've also spent a number of years helping Oregon DOT, helping ODOT with a lot of their legislative initiatives. And so that probably was my primary focus, and we passed. The bill passed. We got some good funding, and that was in 2017. And now that funding's just about over, and it's time to be looking for more. But ACEC Oregon has a lobbyist here in Salem, and the good news is I'm right here. So the Capitol is 10 minutes away from my office. And so I spent a lot of time in little 15-minute discussions, including, the Senate President, the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House, who is now our governor, and some key legislators, and learned a lot along the way. What I learned, number one, is engineers are considered to be an incredibly honest industry. So when we speak, people listen, which made me feel very good. And being a female engineer sort of, I think, gave me just a little bit of credibility as I walked into some of the legislators who are women themselves into their offices. It was nice for them to see someone. And And then lastly, legislators don't know what you do. And so you really have to go speak to them and tell them what's important, because they don't know what it takes to get water to their tap. They don't know what it takes to keep a bridge standing. They just know those things work or they don't. And so I kind of found my voice and found my stride in that point. And now I'm continue to be our legislative chair for ACEC Oregon, and our ACEC Oregon National Director. So I'm steeped in politics at the local level and at the national level. And like I said, I would have never guessed ever in a million years when I started, when I went up to UC Davis.